on Monday morning. We are back in New York, and we've got a Super Bowl champion. The Kansas City Chiefs do it again. Super Bowl 57, an exciting game, and they beat the Philadelphia Eagles in this high-scoring affair, and Patrick Mahomes gets another one. Andy Reid gets another one. Patrick Mahomes has another Super Bowl MVP, and more importantly than anything this morning, Boomer, Young Joker is a Super Bowl champion. My guy has his hands and his mouth all over that Lombardi, and he played a big role in the game. So did that call at the end of the game, the defensive holding that did affect the outcome. But it's not all about one play, Boomer. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, G. I'm hanging in there. I'm about 85% still, So, but it's good to be back. And I will say this, that it was an amazing game by Patrick Mahomes for sure, especially when, he hurt his ankle at the end of the second quarter and he's limping in and you're like, oh my God, so this high ankle sprain thing still obviously bothered him through both the AFC Championship game and now the Super Bowl. And, it's one of those injuries where, you can come out and as long as nobody's tweaking it and you're not tweaking it the wrong way, you could play on it with stability and you can feel really strong about it. But the moment it gets hit the wrong way or something else, it's like a shock wave going through your ankle. And I think that's most likely what happened to him. And because of the elongated halftime, I think he was able to calm down a little bit. And maybe I doubt they gave him any sort of shot or anything in the ankle. But I'm sure that they did do some treatment to it during halftime. And maybe that elongated halftime helped him out. But, man, he was unbelievable in the second half. That's the guy that, that is the best player in the league right there, without question. And I can't say enough about how well his offensive line played. I mean, they protected their meal ticket, not only in the AFC Championship game, but against this pass rush that came into the game, 4 short of an NFL record for both playoffs and regular season, and they didn't even get a sniff. They didn't even really get a sniff. Where he got hurt, he was out of the pocket and running around. But he is just on a different planet than everybody else. I mean, he plays differently. I can't say enough about him. And then, his humility after the game is really what truly makes him great. He gets up there, they give him the MVP, and he wants to say thank you to his entire teammates. He wants to say thank you to Andy Reid, in the way that, Kelsey talks about Andy Reid and everybody talks about Andy Reid and just how much they all appreciate each other. Gives you a real understanding of how great he is as not only a player, but a person and a leader.
Yeah, and I really started to believe that it was going to be the Chiefs, and I picked the Chiefs after I saw Patrick Mahomes do what he did against the Bengals on that high ankle sprain. And I said, this is just, he's not going to be denied this year. And if they had lost this Super Bowl, it would have been, wow, they really missed out on a lot of opportunities, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, during his prime. This is another missed opportunity. It just didn't feel like it was going to happen. And the reason why is Patrick Mahomes on that run in the fourth quarter where he's basically giving everything that he has for that 18 yards where he scrambles. That was the fastest I think I've ever seen that guy run in his life. And he does this with the injury, and he just was not going to be denied. And in the first half, he really didn't have opportunities because the Eagles played essentially a flawless first half.
I mean, you got to remember, so the Chiefs score a defensive touchdown.
Right.
So that takes a possession away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Kadarius Toney has that long punt return in the second half off of that poor punt. And, that essentially takes an entire 70 yards away from them. In terms of opportunities for putting up more yards. So the yards look like they're depressed, but they're depressed really because of 2 plays.
Yeah.
One is the defensive touchdown, and the other one is the Kadarius Toney punt return down to the 5-yard line.
Let me tell you something. We talked about Kadarius Toney maybe being the Super Bowl MVP at plus 15,000. If he had gotten into the end zone on that punt return, I believe that he had a real shot of winning the Super Bowl MVP because it would have taken away another touchdown from Mahomes.
Yes.
So he wouldn't have had the 3. He would have just had 2. He only threw for whatever it was. It wasn't a ton of yardage.
Yeah, because you didn't have because he lost yards.
And he scored another touchdown. So you would have had the biggest play in the game, the first ever punt return in the history of the Super Bowl for a touchdown. And he had another touchdown on top of that, even though he had really no yards receiving. There was a chance he could have done it.
Yeah.
Plus 15,000.
So when you think about losing a possession in the first half because of the touchdown on defense, and then that long run punt return by Kadarius Toney, this is why the numbers seem depressed for the offense of the Chiefs, man. But I'm telling you, that offensive line was unbelievable. I mean, they didn't get anywhere near him. This is a team that basically assaulted the two quarterbacks in the previous two games, Brock Purdy and, of course, Daniel Jones. They did that in Philadelphia. This is a neutral site and everything else. It's a little bit different. I don't know what to tell you other than the fact that, everybody's going to look at that Bradbury call. And I think I kind of agree with Greg Olson. It feels like, for those of us who have played the game, it feels a little ticky-tacky. But Bradbury said after the game, look, it was I grabbed him. I didn't think they were going to call it in that situation. They did call it in that situation. Called Cheffers, the referee, basically said after the game in the pool report that it was a grab, it was a hold. I think we all know it was a hold. The question is, did it rise to the level of calling it at that moment? Now,
well, I mean, it definitely affected the outcome of the game. There's no two ways about it. And it wasn't that egregious to me. They hadn't called a holding, I think, the entire football game until that moment. I think that's the thing that's frustrating. But just like the AFC Championship game, we were talking about the calls that happened there. I mean, think about these opportunities for the Philadelphia Eagles. They went 3 and out in the fourth quarter when they had the football.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that happened. Obviously, the Jalen Hurts fumble for a touchdown. You had, of course, the big punt return, which was a big deal. They had a 4th and inches, and they end up going a full start to bring them back to 4th and 5. So the Eagles had their mistakes, and they had their issues. So, yes, that call is something that leaves a bad taste in your mouth, just like the AFC Championship game. But, I mean, it's not like the Philadelphia Eagles were dominating this football game, absolutely dominating it early on. They couldn't get the job done. Mahomes came back and beat them.
In all honesty, though, you score 35 points, you expect to win.
Yeah.
And,
this defense stunk for the Eagles. Yeah.
The Eagle defense was, the best defense in football all year long. Had all the numbers, all the statistics, and, they ran into RoboCop at quarterback. And RoboCop just basically went and did what RoboCop always does and seems like big games. We're going to see a lot of these games for the next 5 to 10 years with him and Andy Reid. This team and the turnover on this team, I think I read it was either 13 through 16, I don't know, players left from the previous Super Bowl. So they've had 2/3 of their roster has been turned over since the last Super Bowl. And, when you take a look at, and what I love the most is 2 of the touchdown passes that they had, the one to Kadarius Toney and the one to Sky Moore, were essentially the same type of thing.
Wide open.
Where they were coming in motion, and you had thought that it was going to be a jet sweep or he was going to go all the way across the formation. But this is Andy Reid. This is Andy Reid knowing that the Eagles are going to be in man coverage, that he's going to take 2 of his faster guys. He's going to bring them in short motion. The guys that are covering him on the other side for the Philadelphia Eagles are thinking that they're going to go all the way across the formation. When the ball gets snapped, they basically stop and go back out. And by that time, the guy that's covering each of those guys is standing in the middle of the field while these guys are standing outside the numbers. And brilliant play design. I mean, that's what that is. And those are easy touchdown passes. So I can't say enough about the play design for Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy. And I know that Andy was giving Eric a lot of credit after the game last night. I think he was really trying to push Eric Bieniemy to get an opportunity to go play, to be an offensive coordinator at least somewhere else.
Well, I think that's going to happen. I mean, I think that's probably, he needs to get away from that situation and do it on his own, I think, to maybe get that job and get over the hump. But yeah, I mean, Andy Reid was giving him a ton of credit. And I think the way the Chiefs rebuilt that roster with their offensive weapons, if you look back, I mean, it's genius because there was a lot of guys that they brought in who were like that second tier guy or someone, who was very young. They take a chance on, and Kadarius Toney that fell out of favor with the Giants. Then you get Juju Smith-Schuster, who was a guy that, ended up with the Steelers for a couple of years. He signed a 1-year deal with the Steelers. He didn't do much in that last season. They bring him in on the cheap. They put him in that offense. He's great. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who was like the 3rd option for the Green Bay Packers.
On the cheap.
Right.
That's the key.
Exactly.
On the cheap. All the running backs on the cheap.
Yeah. Isaiah Pacheco, rookie. And then they draft. They drafted McCole Hardman. They drafted Sky Moore. McCole Hardman's been hurt. But the way they got these weapons and these talented guys cheaply to put around Patrick Mahomes to replace Tyreek Hill is just, I think, was genius general managing. And Howie Roseman did a genius job, too. And it's no shock that both these teams of the one season ended up in the Super Bowl in a 3-point game.
Well, this Chief team now is the second team in NFL history that has 75 wins or more in this 5-year span. The other team I think that has maybe one or two more wins, as I think it's the Patriots from 2002 to 2007. So you could see that the trajectory that Patrick Mahomes is on, and even playing with a bad ankle in 3 games. You got to remember, he played the Jacksonville game with the bad ankle. Chad Henne came in and maybe saved the season for them with that 98-yard drive against the Jacksonville Jaguars in the divisional round. But then, Patrick went in the second half of that game. He didn't play great that game. Is the team basically won the game and everything else. And then they came back and, of course, they beat the Bengals, and that was a slugfest. And now this one here, where they put up 38 points, this is more like the Chiefs that we know. This is the offense that we've seen and we've come to love from the Chiefs' perspective. And I don't know. All I can tell you is that it's ridiculous how easy Patrick Mahomes can make it look. But I think a lot of it, like they were saying yesterday, goes to Andy Reid, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I will say that Jalen Hurts played his ass off. He played his ass off. It was a Jalen Hurts Super Bowl, really, until the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
they had that 3 and out, as you pointed out.
He also got a miserable turnover.
But he also got the team, in the spot where he had to score a touchdown, and then he took the 2-point play and he ran it like Barry Sanders, right around the corner, lowered his shoulder, got in. I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah, they showed Howie Roseman right after that 2-point conversion in the box, and you could read his lips. He goes, "We're winning this effing game" at that point.
I can't say enough about the way that Jalen Hurts played.
These two teams were phenomenal. It's heartbreaking for the Eagles, but guess what? You won a Super Bowl in 2017 in one of the most miraculous games ever. So it's not like it's that much heartbreaking for an Eagle fan. It sucks. You want another one, but my Lord.
Did you feel like there were any replays or anything that you felt like,
I didn't like the whole Dallas Goedert situation because it's just weird when they decide to use the expedited replay or not.
Yeah.
And then, Andy Reid has to use a challenge. I don't blame him using the challenge at that point, but then it ends up being a lost challenge and a lost timeout.
Right.
So it's like, if I were a coach or I were in charge of that challenge flag, I would be very confused as to when to use it, when not to use it, and when they were going to use the expedited replay. But I think Andy Reid, even though they lost the challenge and they lost the timeout, did the right thing by checking that, because that was a critical play at that point.
And by the way, it was a great play.
Yeah.
It was a great catch. It was a tremendous throw. And as Greg Olson said, when he let it go, he thought it was going to be an interception. When in actuality, that was the play I think that Joe Burrow had against the Chiefs, where one of those young defensive backs went up and knocked it down, or just barely tipped it, because he had a guy open over the top of him in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
But man, that was some catch. Oh my God, that was some catch.
Yeah.
What about the Devontae Smith catch along the sideline that they did overturn?
Yeah, that's another one that, to me, the nose of the ball hits the ground, and you saw that final angle because they kept showing from the sideline. Then when they showed from the field, you could see that the ball had moved when the nose of the ball had gone. So to me, it was like, it's you have a million angles, and you found the one because you're searching for the one to overturn it, and they got it. So, I think both of those would have been upheld if there were no replay. The Goddard one, which was ultimately, and of course, there was a catch, and the Devontae Smith one as well. But yeah, I think with the letter of the law, I saw that ball move when he went down with it.
The letter of the law sucks, honestly.
Yeah.
These guys make these unbelievable catches. And it was good to see that, from the Eagles' perspective anyway, that A.J. Brown got involved. I remember sitting there going, man, A.J. Brown's got to get involved here sooner or later.
Yeah.
And they hit him on back-to-back receptions, and he got himself in the game. I'm trying to think. I think if I'm a Philadelphia Eagle fan, I'm just really disappointed that my defense didn't do what my defense has done all year long. Now, a lot of the players were complaining about the field, that the field was slick, and I know they were talking about it. The Eagles had, problems with their shoes and all that other stuff. And, they put so much time and effort in this field that it's ridiculous that, guys would be complaining about a Super Bowl.
Yeah, it was really pathetic, and they spent $800,000 on this field. So I saw this actually before the game. They grew the grass on a sod farm and then would bring it out, because they have this technology there in that stadium where it just, the field moves out.
It's on a tray.
Yeah, so they would move it out into the sun to have the grass grow and do all of this stuff. $800,000 for this field that they're slipping all over the place. And Terry Bradshaw actually mentioned, he's like, like, I guess they painted the entire field, and even some of like the grass, they painted more green, and that's what was making it slick. And it just is, it's unacceptable for a game like this. I mean, even, on the
maybe
final
that's one
kick,
of the reasons why it was 38-35.
Yeah, absolutely, because you would think that the offense would have an advantage in that situation. I mean, even on the game-winning kick by Butker, Greg Olson is bringing up the fact that, like, look, there's the Super Bowl logo. There's paint there. I mean, he could fall right on his ass and slip.
The amazing thing is if you watch any of the Phoenix Open, you saw where you had all this green grass, and then around it you had all this brown grass.
Sure.
Well, basically because it was so cold out there that the grass is not really, it's dormant right now. It hasn't really started to grow. Normally it does start to grow this in February, but it hadn't started to grow yet. So most of the golf courses out there that you see, including the Waste Management Open, they paint the grass green. See what I'm saying?
Yes.
So they paint the grass green, and I wouldn't be surprised that would be the case here, although it could have been under heaters, I'm not sure. But when you have all those logos on the field and the field looks great and everything else, you tend to forget about the footing. Our Super Bowl 23 down at it was Joe Robbie Stadium at that time, and it had just opened. When we got out on the field, man, the field looked gorgeous. But then we had a rainstorm that day. It was kind of like a really bad rainstorm overnight, and kind of rained during the morning. And they had the pumps on and all that other stuff. And somebody left the pumps on. And our field was so bad because when you stepped in it, you slid, and the turf would come up from underneath you. And, we had our best defensive lineman, Tim Crummer, snapped his leg in that quarter because of that field. And, we had the opposite. This field was tight. I'm sure that it was pretty hard. It looked pretty hard to me. And our field was soft, long grass, and it was coming out in chunks. It was like hitting down on a golf ball and just taking a huge divot.
Yeah.
So we had the opposite. So they put all this freaking time and effort in these fields. And I'm like, these teams are used to playing on synthetic fields, and that's where the defense really gets its speed from, because they have better footing. So maybe that's one of the reasons why so many points were scored.
Yeah, maybe. And every player talks about how they'd rather be on grass, just not grass like this, because this
just too
didn't
tight,
work out.
too hard, and they had too much paint on the field, meaning, the end zones were all painted, center, the midpoint of the field, 50-yard line had the NFL logo on it. You had the Super Bowl logos on it. So a lot of that area, I'm sure, probably gave a lot of second thoughts to defensive players on both teams trying to keep their footing.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.